Hello, everyone, and welcome to Pass the Noise, the podcast where we have open forum, open discussions about all kinds of topics. No topics off limits, no topic is out of bounds. We're going to discuss anything and everything, and we're just so glad that you have joined us. I am your host, Elder Michael Hightower, or co-host, joined by, of course, Apostle T.B. Walker, my co-host.
Certainly glad
How
to
you
have
doing,
everybody
Apostle?
here. Glad to see you, Elder.
Absolutely. So before we get, I'm really excited about tonight's topic, which is the overturning of Roe v. Wade, just specifically in abortion in general. But first, I want to remind everyone that this is an interactive show. You're invited to call in and to give your comments, to ask questions, whatever input you want to give is absolutely fine with us. You do not have to agree with this. We really don't care if you agree or disagree. It's a discussion. So
That's right.
if you disagree, you can call in. If you agree, you can call in. The way you do that is a link. The link you should see right above the comment section, or depending on what kind of device you have, you may have to go to the overview tab. But I'm also just going to throw the link in the comments from time to time, and I'll just remind you, hey, you can call in, and I'll put the link in the comment section. You can see it, and we can go from there. So without further ado, let's get into tonight's topic. Again, don't know where you would have to be to not have heard that the 1973 Roe versus Wade Supreme Court decision was overturned a week or so ago. That decision, the original decision, 1973, made abortion legal in all the states because it made it a constitutional right, meaning the states couldn't pass any laws that would prohibit it. They can pass laws to sort of make it hard, but they couldn't outright ban it. And so that is what that decision was all about. So let's start with the clip, a news clip, Apostle, from that time when
Okay.
an announcement was made about Roe v. Wade.
The Supreme Court today legalized abortions. The majority in cases from Texas and Georgia said that the decision to end a pregnancy during the first 3 months belongs to the woman and her doctor, not the government. Thus, the anti-abortion laws of 46 states were rendered unconstitutional. More on this story from George Herman.
In two related cases and 8 separate opinions, the 9 justices made abortion largely a private matter and ordered the states to make no laws forbidding it, except possibly during the final months. The court split 7-2, with Justices Byron White and William Rehnquist dissenting. In effect, the court makes abortion subject only to the decision of the pregnant woman's doctor. It ruled that states may make no laws restricting a doctor's right to decide his patient needs an abortion and to carry out that abortion during the first 3 months of a pregnancy. After that comparatively safe 3-month period, abortions may be regulated, but not prohibited by state law and for the benefit of the mother's health alone. Abortion is somewhat more dangerous at this stage, and states may insist, for example, that they be performed in regulated hospitals. Only in the final stages of pregnancy may states intervene and say no to abortion. The court's decision, written by Justice Blackmun, thus sets limits on the right to abortion on demand. One limit is the time when doctors believe the fetus may be able to survive outside the mother's womb. At that point, usually in the 7th month of pregnancy, the state may take legal action to protect the unborn child, even forbidding abortion except to protect the mother. The newly liberalized abortion law brought immediate reaction.
I think that to raise the dignity of woman and give her freedom of choice in this area is an extraordinary event. And I think that January 22nd, 1973 would be an historic day.
In this instance, the Supreme Court has withdrawn protection for the human rights of unborn children, and it is teaching people that abortion is a rather innocuous procedure provided that there are proper legal safeguards. I think that the judgment of the court will do a great deal to tear down the respect previously accorded human life in our culture.
So, yes, a lot to unpack in that clip. It's about only 2 minutes or so long, but there's a lot there. First thing is context. That's when I have a little context. You heard him say in the clip in 1973, abortion was illegal in 46 states, which means if you wanted an abortion, you have to travel to a state that actually had, provided abortions. It would be difficult for some women, obviously. And so obviously you would have a situation where a woman who may want an abortion may have to resort to someone who perhaps wasn't qualified in a facility, it was perhaps wasn't that clean, under circumstances that weren't that great. A doctor, a licensed doctor, isn't necessarily going to take a chance in performing an abortion if it's illegal. Even if they were wanted to, they weren't not going to be able to do it at the hospital. They have privileges at because they don't want it. The hospital wouldn't be interested in that. So, at the time, it really was pretty much abortion was banned in this country until 1973 when this decision came down. And so that's sort of the context when people talk about going back and to this time, that's what they're really referring to, a time when abortion was truly not legal. And then you heard basically the two point of view that we pretty much still hear today: the life of the ability of the mother to choose versus the life of the child. That's 50 years. We're still having the same conversation about the same thing. So, Apostle, I'd like to give your thoughts on what we saw in that clip.
Well, listen, I think that was just like you said, that was a really, really historic clip. One of the things that I really pulled out, of the clip that I think was being dealt with there and maybe not completely understood then, as it is obviously not completely understood now, which is the issue that I think is on the table that was really being dealt with by the Supreme Court there, which was about choice and less about abortion. I mean, in a lot of ways that was really, even though abortion is the issue and it's the overriding issue and it's clear that was the action, in a lot of ways, the decision really wasn't about, are you about a pro-abortion or not? I think the real question was, what's the view on a woman's right to choose, even something that you don't necessarily agree with? And I think to be honest with you, I think the Supreme Court came as close in 73 to getting it right as I think as you can. That's at least my view right now.
Sure. Sure. So I mean, the court sort of made it clear that they were trying to balance those two things.
Yes.
And so the allowing abortion or making it a constitutional right and legal wasn't blanket. They still acknowledge that the state might have an interest in the life going inside the woman. Like there's another life in play here, and there's a point at which you can't ignore that.
Sure.
So if you look, I'm gonna bring up this slide because this was interesting as well in terms of their ruling. So if you look, they really tried to balance. So part of the ruling was a state may have a interest at some point in a woman's pregnancy. It's not a complete, right to privacy thing.
Sure.
But also they totally punted on when life begins. They totally the second paragraph totally punted. Like we're not here to decide that. We're not here to decide whether it's conception, whether it's 6 weeks or 3 weeks or whatever. They really weren't interested in doing that, and they were just really trying, like I said, trying to balance the two. And in doing that, if you think about it, they came with the trimester method, which is first trimester, states couldn't do anything to restrict it. First trimester is whatever. Women can choose to do whatever they want. Second trimester, the state can impose some restrictions, but only if they're taking into account the health of the mother. Third trimester, the state can impose restrictions, mostly because they felt like that's when the fetus was viable, what they knew then, viable outside the womb, and it was, that's when they basically acknowledged this is a life that needs to be protected.
Right. Absolutely. And listen, I think they punted on the idea or the question of when life begins, because in truth, I don't think that's a settled matter. I don't think that's a settled matter, whether that is, from a religious standpoint. I don't think it's a settled matter, even from a medical standpoint. And again, which is why I think we've got this great unsettled issue, but I think we've got a much or equally as large issue, which comes down to the choice and the idea of choosing, and does a woman have a right to choose, even if we come to the agreement that the life starts at 3 months, if the life starts at whatever time, does a woman have a right to really choose? And I think in essence, that might be our real issue. And I think the real question is going to be, the separation of church and state. Many of these issues that we're having right now, they come really from the religious views that we have and mixing those in, I think, with the government, right? We know that. Yeah. But I think if you begin to look at that, even from a spiritual view, the question would be, I wonder if choice is something that is God-given. And when I look at it biblically, I look at choice and I think, man, this is absolutely choice is kind of a God-given right. The first thing that happens in the garden, right? I mean,
Mhm.
we could actually be made to just simply eat of one fruit, right? The tree of life. But it
Right.
isn't the first thing that God does. He gives now this great gift of choice. I'll put it there. I'll tell you which one I want you to choose, want you to get.
Mhm.
But here's the gift: you choose.
Mhm.
Doesn't mandate worship. There's never a place where he makes us to praise him. And Jesus even comes with salvation that says, listen, if you believe in me, you choose. You have to choose. And I wonder if we look at this from a biblical perspective,
Mhm.
even if we don't like the idea of abortion, I wonder if
Right.
we throw out choice
Right.
because we don't like that particular action.
Mhm. You know, I mean, I think that to your point, there's ideology, there's sort of your philosophical way of looking at things, or even the biblical way, and then there's real life.
Right,
So
right, right.
I would describe myself as pro-life and anti-abortion.
Yes.
That's how I would describe myself. But in all reality, as the husband of a wife who had two children, if the decision came down to my wife or the unborn child, I'm picking my wife every time. I mean, it's not even like a difficult decision. I mean, that's what I'm doing. So even in that, this like it's not a gray area, but there's just a lot of shades of this isn't as simple as abortion is murder, or women, or life all just life all the time. I mean, it's not that black and white. I don't think.
Well, nothing is. When you
Yeah.
look at thou shalt not kill, right? I mean, it
Hmm.
doesn't just stop there because later on you'll find out that there's manslaughter. There's unintentional death.
Hmm.
There's cities of refuge where you got to figure this out to determine who. So the reality is, I think abortion and the whole idea here is really nuanced. It has to be taken on a case by case basis. But I think the idea of just removing that choice is devaluing women. I think it devalues women and even the ability they have to make decisions about what is actually theirs. And I think in the end of the day, from a all male perspective, it's easy for men to actually look at their bodies as theirs because there's no place where we don't govern our bodies. This is a place where women are now have an issue
Hmm.
where they don't get to govern themselves. And I think this is kind of a way we're moving in a direction that I think we haven't quite gotten there yet.
So does it matter to you
Hmm.
how a woman becomes pregnant? That is, if it's she didn't mean to, but she did, irresponsible behavior. Let's call it that. Does it matter? Does that matter to you? Is that a factor in how you see it?
No, to be honest with you, no, I don't. I mean, again, I like it, but
Hmm.
this the pro-choice and the ability to choose, I think has to still be there. I mean,
Hmm.
when you look at this, I mean, and we look at fighting this, or there's on a side that we fight to make sure that children live and we want them to enter into the world, but we also have a government and programs that don't take care of these same children. That same
True.
young
Yeah.
mother, that we look and say, well, you're going to have this baby anywhere. We still want to fight to make sure that the government keeps them in a certain position, that they don't
Hmm.
get the best health care. So we're going to make sure this child comes to the world, but we will also are not going to make the provisions that are needed to take care of that child. So I think that it has to be balanced, but I don't think that there's any place that I can see, other than the limits that the Supreme Court in the 70s put on, that
Hmm.
you can actually now say, what is this woman's body is still hers, no matter whether I like what she's doing with it or not. I think that that's the very same thing that you see in the garden. God has a plan. Here's what I want you to do, but he never takes away choice. And I think we are, in some ways, it's a rebuke against God. In some ways, in a lot of ways, here's what we're saying. You know what? We're doing what you should have done in the first place. You never took away choice. You gave us these options. How many people, when they look at perfection, they say, why didn't he
Hmm.
just make us do right? That's not God's
True.
way. And the very
Yeah.
same people who are using and lifting up God to really now talk about anti-abortion are really not looking at this way that says, I've never forced you. I've
Hmm.
never mandated it. Legislating morality has never worked.
No.
It's
Right.
never worked. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean? We legislate morality, take away alcohol. What do you get? Bootlegging. You know, you
Mm-hmm.
get speakeasies. You
Right.
develop the mafia, La Cosa Nostra. So I mean, there's nothing. You know what? I mean, let's take away the marijuana. You know, we're gonna just knock it out the way. And what do we get? We get the birth of the weed man. So I mean, at the end of the day, none of the things we've tried to do in terms of legislating morality will ever work. And I wonder if America's hands are clean enough to be the arbiters of this morality.
No, it's not. No, it's not. But when it comes to, because I mean, it's somewhat, a lot complicated, because you
Sure.
have the woman's choice, but then you also have the medical component to it. So the state has an interest in that regard, because they license doctors, they license
Sure.
hospitals, so they have an interest in sort of the medical thing, and they also don't want to make sure that people are not doing stuff under duress. If someone's
Right.
forcing you to have an abortion, or someone's forcing you to keep the baby. Like, to
Sure.
your point, that's the opposite of choice. I'm gonna force you to do one way or
Absolutely.
the other because I don't agree with it. I'm gonna force you to do it. That's not what we're trying to get to either. So all those things are sort of outside of what should be happening. I totally agree with that.
Sure. And I think it's a question also of morality, and where does this sense of morality really come from?
Um, I'm gonna say, and I'm gonna throw the calling link in the comments real quick if someone wants to call in. Put it in there. So I think that came from, like, when I was talking about the context in which this United States was living in 1973, where it was illegal in 46 states.
Right.
Women were under control. I mean, women didn't have a lot of rights. I mean, I'm pretty sure, I'm sure, women didn't get to vote until 1920. So that was
Right.
50 years before Roe v. Wade. So it's not like we're talking about hundreds, hundreds and hundreds of thousands of years. I
That's
mean,
right.
women are just basically coming up from under a rock. I mean, so there's this huge pressure on controlling what women do. So if you think about it, if you're, in the 60s and the 50s and 40s, a woman's pregnant, she's not doing nothing about the baby without her husband, unless she wants to get,
Right.
really in trouble, right? I mean, at that time, husbands had free reign to pretty much do whatever they wanted to their wives. So almost like their property. So there's no way that a woman was just getting an abortion without the consent of her husband. And so that sense of control, I think, just found its way into the government, as it would, because the government was men.
Yes.
Men. The Supreme Court, it was all men. Even in this decision, it
Absolutely.
was all men. Government officials, just about all men. And so you have that control, men controlling women dynamic, that I think led to a lot of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And but now you've got quite a few women now who are now on the Supreme Court.
Yeah.
Um, but I think the idea now is less about your gender and more about your political views, your political
100%.
leanings, some of
100%.
the more fundamental beliefs
Mhm.
that maybe from a puritanical historical place, and a lot less
Sure.
from a true biblical place. This
Hmm.
is tradition and not necessarily the Bible.
Yes.
These are standard accepted Republican values, maybe.
Mhm.
These are standard accepted liberal democratic values, maybe, but not necessarily biblical values. So we kind of make God a Republican.
A right wing Republican, not just a
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
Let's see, we have a caller.
All right.
Let's get this caller here. Okay. Sean Fader. Sean Fader, welcome to Pass the Noise.
Thank you. This is an interesting discussion. I think it's a controversial one in so many areas, and my head is swirling. I think on some level, I kind of hear what the position that both of you all are taking, but I've been angry for a long time when I've seen anti-abortion groups and advocates bombing clinics and just really committing all kinds of violence. Now, these are people that say they're pro-life, but then they're doing things that are taking the lives of other people who in many cases are simply trying to provide good health care to those that don't have it, education to those that don't have it. So I just sort of see the hypocrisy in that, and it makes me angry. I think the other thing, and I'm kind of venting right now, is when I also see the pro-lifers talk about life, And yet, how many of them are going into the foster care system and adopting some of these children that they now are saying, you're going to have them no matter what, and figure it out. But you're going to have tons and tons and tons of children that will be in foster care for their entire lives. They will never be adopted. And don't let them have some color to their skin, then they definitely won't be adopted. So I just look at that and I'm thinking, did anyone consider that when they were pounding their chests and saying, we want to stop this? And then I guess my last concern, as I'm venting, because this is really a hot button topic, not just for me, but other folks that I've been talking to,
Sure.
is now, just as you said about, bootlegging and prohibition and what that led to, people are going underground now. And what is
Absolutely.
that going to lead to? I saw something where Google has been tracking the number of folks that are looking for abortion pills and putting in searches for that. So what is this decision? What door is this going to open to something that's going to be far worse than what they were fighting against? So I'll be quiet and listen to you all comment, but excellent topic.
Thank you, John Faye. Thanks for calling.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Elder, you want to take that one? You want to start with that?
So there's a lot in there.
There's a lot there. There's a lot there.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of, let's deal with the social aspect first. So in terms of forcing women to have children that they don't want to have for whatever reason, and then sort of like, whatever happens after that, I don't really care. It's just you just gonna have the baby. I think there's something to that. I think it's a full blown societal breakdown with regard to children. I mean, it starts with for one thing, as a grandparent, I can't imagine a scenario where I would have a grandchild that would go into foster care, and for some reason, could not take care of them. That's what family would do. I think that's something that's sort of going by the wayside. I mean, I'm thinking, 18, 19-year-old young ladies has a child that she doesn't want or can't take care of. Where's the family? That's the first thing. But then that second safety net really should be society. I mean, society really should be stepping up and trying to make sure that, these children are not just abandoned. I don't think that that's in any way, shape, form, or fashion that's it's certainly not godly, and it's not even neighborly. It's not even like someone who's really looking out for their fellow man. I don't like that at all.
Yeah. Well, absolutely. I mean, I hope, Elder, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I'm good. Yep.
Well, I think, you're absolutely, I think what you're saying is absolutely right. And it would be great if we had that world. I think, unfortunately, we are walking and living this wonderful hypocrisy of the American dream that actually is not there. The family unit has been broken down by lots of reasons. And the truth of the matter is that 18, 19-year-old is really not who we're looking at. She's 14, 15. So the reality is she's 14, 15, she's impoverished, and in so many cases, the face of this girl is not some, a cherry-cheeked Caucasian young lady. It is oftentimes someone brown or black or someone of color. And so there is an automatic movement of a whole generation of people that we're going to mandate into second-class citizenship from the beginning. And you know what? We're not looking at the best solution possible, right? We're really having to deal with the best of the worst. Abortion is not the best solution, but it is the best of the worst. And unfortunately, in a fallen world, we sometimes have to make decisions based upon the best of the worst. It's impossible for life to be so important and then, send our boys off to war. I mean, to literally and to salute it as if it's a great thing. But then, of course, when you're out of the womb, we don't, you can go and die. But we care about when you're in the womb. We want to make sure you live so you can go out and die. There's such a great hypocrisy that's there. And as long as you're born, we don't care how you live. That's an amazing hypocrisy that I think many people on the pro-life side aren't looking at.
I mean, there have definitely been some issues with the pro-life side. I mean, you can start with, like Sean Fader said, on the bombing of abortion clinics, targeting abortion doctors, harassing them for essentially doing their job. But might not like it, but that's their job, that's their profession. And she made another point about going back to 1973. We know that in the 1970s and 60s, women had unsafe abortions and were
Sure.
essentially mutilated for life. Because again, you're dealing with somebody who's probably shouldn't be practicing any kind of medicine, in a facility that's dirty with equipment that's inferior, and so you're going to
Right.
get an inferior result under those circumstances. But that's what women were sort of faced with, and know that's reality. And we know that that's going to happen again in some places where women are not going to, where it's going to be illegal to get an abortion.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we have another call. We have Clarice. Hello, Clarice. Welcome to
Hi.
Pass the Cards.
Oh, thank you.
Hey, Clarice.
Like, hey, Pastor. So when the verdict came out, you know,
Mhm.
I had mixed emotions about it.
Mhm.
I didn't want to go against God, of course, and his word. But at the same time, I thought about the women who, or the girls who had been raped, got pregnant from rape, got
Mhm.
pregnant, just by accident. I'll just say that.
Okay.
And I thought what I thought was, how awful it would be to carry the a baby, you know, of your rapist, you know, as a mother and as a woman, I would never want to um just go through the process of carrying a child of someone who was so violent. So that's where my heart was going to, and my heart was like divided because, like I said, I didn't want to go against God and His word, but at the same time, my heart went out to those women, those children who who will be forced to carry a baby that they don't want. My heart didn't go out to the people that's just out there running the streets and just having babies, whomever, because I do know people who just had an abortion like it was just a birth control pill
Mhm.
or
Right.
Mhm.
something like that. It was just mostly for the people who were victims. And I also agree with Sean Fada when she says something about how she was angry that pro-life protesters were being just as violent as the people who were fighting to keep abortion legal. I didn't understand that. Like, if you are pro-life, why are you so angry that you're going to the point extent where you're going to take an adult's life away? And then I also thought, if the people who are, using abortion as just like a birth control method, why don't you just take your own life and just let the baby stay alive so that they will have a life? I had so many thoughts and so many emotions. So
Mhm.
I just wanted to share that with you guys.
Thank you for sharing
Uh,
that, Clarice.
no, we appreciate it. Hang on for a second, Clarice. I just want to make a quick point. Like, to your point and to what I was talking about earlier, when we talk in absolutes as humans, that's when we sort of get in trouble and put ourselves in a box. When you say absolutely not or absolutely yes, you're ignoring all the nuances and all the different kinds of ways that someone could find themselves pregnant or in a position to want an abortion. I mean, for every abortion, there's a story behind that, and everyone's probably a little bit
Hmm.
different. And so when you ignore that, when there's just a faceless, nameless woman, that woman, she's a murderer, when you just reduce them to that and not a human being who is struggling with this decision. Probably, if she's, I mean, if she has any feeling, she's wrestling with it. I think when you ignore that, you make them less than human. Then that allows you to throw the Molotov cocktail into the abortion clinic. But if you see them as people, then you try to say, okay, now what can I do to help? What can I do to help women so that they don't get pregnant, if they don't want to be pregnant, or
Right,
support them through an unwanted pregnancy? What can I do?
right.
Hey,
Yeah.
Clarice, let me speak to your. I hope I didn't interrupt you, but
Nope.
Clarice, let me speak to this idea of the conflict that we have. I think as a Christian, my hope is that Christians will examine their conflicts based upon the Bible and not
Mhm.
based upon our traditional beliefs. Where is the conflict that biblically that we'll find in terms of this abortion? What did Jesus say concerning that? Where is the conflict that we're finding in terms of a woman who's been raped? And what's supposed to happen with her, and where is that conflict that we're getting from the Bible? Now, we get it from people who espouse their own particular beliefs, but I wonder if
Hmm.
we're looking at the word and getting and seeing Well, Jesus said that if this happens, this is what must happen. You know what I mean? Are we getting this from the word? As we're trying to make sure that we don't conflict with the Bible, are we in a place where we're looking at the Bible and saying, yeah, here's what he said, so I don't want to go against that? I think that that's where we have to really look and say, are some of the conflicts that we're having in terms of our faith false choices? Are there choices that are just given to us by a certain group of people? Or is that really a dilemma that's presented to us in the word? Is that compassion and where we're supposed to look? Is that demonstrated for us in the word? Or is God the kind of God who simply says, hey, I don't care what happened to you. You're going to carry this baby forward because the womb, the baby, the fetus matters more than you. Now, if that's a biblical conflict, I just would love to see that. And I think oftentimes we're having conflicts that come from traditional views that don't come from the word of God. If you have a
Right.
conflict, I want that conflict to come from the word. If you see a God, if the God you serve is the God who looks and says, yes, you've been abused, you're 11 years old, and you know there's zero compassion for you. If that's how you see it, then find that conflict in the word. But I wonder if you'll find it. I wonder if it isn't one that we've created for ourselves and made God a moral agent based upon our standards and not based upon the standards that we will see in this word. There's so much more compassion in Christ that you'll find in his word than you may find in some of his churches.
Right. That's where eventually I did come to the conclusion that,
Yes,
it's all about compassion. And that's where I feel like the believers of today have just lost that compassion for everybody. It's all about, our own beliefs, our what we think and what we believe and how we feel it should happen. Or, we don't, some of us, I'm not going to say that all of us,
sure.
don't take the time out to see and talk to these people who are struggling, who's these people who are having, conflict of interest, because we know what we've been taught, but at the
Right.
same time, my feelings, my hurt and my pain, it's so heavy and so deep. So for the all the, and I want to say this for all the pro-life, protesters out there, if we want them to keep the baby, make sure we have a solution for them, the counseling that they need,
Right.
to get through this. If it's poverty issues, how can we help them get out of poverty so that they can, take care of themselves and take care of their children without having, the overweighted burden of being a single parent, if that's what they were, the situation that they were in, which more than likely that is the situation. You don't have the resources available. And if they don't want to have raise a child, they just absolutely cannot. You know, what are we doing about the overcrowded um adoption places? Most of the kids that come out of there are, they go right into poverty. They go right into, criminal
Mhm.
actions and things like that. We got to have, as a country, we got to have the solutions for these things if we don't want, these, people dying from because they're trying to find a way to get an abortion.
Guys, you brought up some great points. I think, listen, I think one of the things that we have to deal with is that we don't have a solution. I mean, listen,
Right.
we
Yeah.
don't have a solution in this country. And, and our morality simply says, well, let's just keep going until we find a solution. Listen, we may be in a position where our morality is getting us in trouble. And you know what? There may be solutions that are just solutions that we just loathe, we just don't want to admit. But the truth of the
Hmm.
matter is, there are situations where there are women who simply cannot, bear these children.
Mhm.
They can't take care of them, and we have a system that is simply unable to actually do anything for this next generation of children. We've got to make some hard decisions, and sometimes abortion is one of those very hard decisions, but might be better than the solution that we think is right, because we're having a world that we're seeing. It doesn't seem like it's working out. Kids are
Amen.
aging out of
Yeah.
foster homes. They're
Yeah.
going in at 9 and leaving at 21. They're leaving at 19. Where this is just a ridiculous situation, and we're creating problems for ourselves that are worse than the ones that we're trying to avoid.
Yeah. That's sad. It's sad.
It's a fallen world. There's no
Yeah.
great solution here. That we're only picking the best of the worst.
Yeah.
That's what wisdom does, unfortunately.
Right. Thanks a lot, guys. This is an awesome topic, and
Thank you.
y'all just way too brilliant for me.
Listen, we were blessed by your comments.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Thank
Thank you
you.
for calling. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, yeah, that was good. So,
Yeah.
so, so now that Roe v. Wade has been overturned, let's talk a little bit about what that actually means.
Okay.
Because it didn't in and of itself take away the right or the legal status of a woman to have an abortion. It
Sure.
threw it back to the states. So now each individual state is going to make their own decision about what kind of laws
Right.
they're going to pass on this issue. What's interesting is that's going to cause people to, I mean, if you care, to be more involved in their local politics. I mean, do you know who your mayor is? Do you know who your city council people are? Do you know who your state senators are? Do you live in a state with a strong governor or a weak governor? I mean, all these kind of things will now play in because, there's a lot of things other than abortion in which these people could have control over the day-to-day, more control over day-to-day lives than anybody in Washington. So it's
Right.
interesting to see how people react to that.
Oh yeah, well, we heard what Clarence Thomas said. There's an eye on. This is just the beginning of the first of the many, many dominoes, that are there. And again, so many of these things are things that I may be on the opposite side of. I think that what we're experiencing and what you said, this is a time of activism. This is a time of people really. I mean, if this really matters, you won't be able to do this from your living room. These people are going to have to get involved.
Yeah.
And I think that some of these things happen to really shake us, to make us aware that, like, okay, if you're not going to go to the PTA meeting, then check out what's going to happen in your school, right?
Right.
So, I mean, we're not going to get involved, and we just want to, look at TikTok, and we just think that, what's going on in Washington doesn't matter. You're going to see that it matters more than whatever you can get on TikTok, whatever you can get on YouTube. This is so much further, because in order to live peaceful lives, part of what we have to do is get involved with this socially and politically, because this will affect our lives. It doesn't just affect our politics over there. It affects the rights that we really have as citizens here.
Absolutely. And to that point, here is the current legal status of abortion by state in terms of the number of states that have a prohibition, or they restrict it, or it's legal for now, or it's completely legal. This is all going to change. I mean, the fight is going to be at the state level. So some of this is going to change. But in some cases, like prohibited means either there's a ban in effect, there's a ban that's expected, or there's a ban that was blocked by some other court. And I've seen already, like I think in Mississippi and other states, where they've already had going back and forth and appeals and laws, all kinds of stuff. So this is going to be an ongoing thing. It's not going to be solved, in this hour we have here. I mean, it's going to be a long, ongoing sort of fight. And if people care, they should get involved. What's going on in their state, because in some states, even the one that says legal for now means exactly that. It means those states are going to let the courts and their state legislators make the laws now. So if you care, now's the time to find out who are your state legislators. Who are the people that you're electing for judge? We get stuff in the mail all the time now. It's election time. Vote this person for judge, and that person for judge. Do you know what that person's positions are? You should. I mean, if you're going to vote, but you got to get involved, and we got to know what the people who are going to be making these these rules and laws, what they're about.
Absolutely. I mean, it's essential. That's essential. No doubt about it.
Yeah. So in this last segment, we got about 20 minutes or so. One of the things I think that makes it really hard to deal with this issue is the politics of it. The Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative. People wear it as a badge. I'm pro this, or I'm anti that, or I'm pro this. And the thing is, because nobody's going to stay in the same exact position necessarily the whole time, you have sort of all these shifting, mushy things within the political realm. And really, even though, again, because it's going to be handled at the states, it is important to get involved politically. You kind of have to still understand what that's going to look like in terms of how politicians are going to present these things to you.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, listen, there's no way you can actually get involved without really and truly getting involved and being a part of the presentation.
Mhm.
You know, in the end of the day, it's really not just being on the outskirts. We've really got to get involved and be a part of presenting this issue from the position that that we believe. Now, again,
Mhm.
the what we believe is still, what's there is where the real that's the devil in the details. You know, really getting a
Right.
coalition together to be able to really know what's there. You know, I think the
Mhm.
first place is education. You know,
Yeah.
we have come into this issue knowing what we already know, believing what we
Mhm.
already believe. I think the first thing that has to happen is that people have to open their minds again and to
Hmm.
be able to really, really get re-educated about the issue. You know, we come into it and say, well, God, God made you, he allowed you to be pregnant, then this is what he wants. And we put words in God's mouth and we just don't, so we come into it because that's what's been told to us for the last 50 years.
Mhm.
Or for the last 50 years, someone has said, this is an issue we've got to fight. We've got to overturn this, or we've got to maintain it. And I don't know if this generation is sure what it believes. I think this is a real fact-finding time for the church. I think it's a real fact-finding time for ourselves. And we'll now see, what did God really say? Or
Mhm.
have we been putting words in his mouth for the last 50 years?
We definitely, yeah, definitely, definitely gonna find that out. Let's take a look at. I thought this was interesting
Okay.
to go back and see how people who have been in charge of talking about politics, in charge politically, have sort of managed this
Shifted.
issue.
Yeah.
Big issue in Washington. Would President Trump ban partial birth abortion?
Well, look, I'm very pro-choice. I hate the concept of abortion. I hate it. I hate everything it stands for. I cringe when I listen to people debating the subject. But I just believe in choice. And again, it may be a little bit of a New York background because there is some different attitude in different parts of the country. And, I was raised in New York and grew up and work and everything else in New York City. But I am strongly for choice, and yet I hate the concept of abortion.
But you would not ban it?
No.
Or ban partial birth abortion?
No, I am pro-choice in every respect and as far as it goes, but I just hate it.
Let's pick up on another issue which divides you and the justices that whoever ends up winning this election appoints could have a dramatic effect there, and that's the issue of abortion.
Right.
Mr. Trump, you're pro-life, but I want to ask you specifically, do you want the court, including the justices that you will name, to overturn Roe v. Wade, which includes, in fact, states a woman's right to abortion?
Well, if that would happen, because I am pro-life and I will be appointing pro-life judges, I would think that will go back to the individual states.
But I'm asking you specifically, would you
If they overturned it, it'll go back to the states.
But what I'm asking you, sir, is do you want to see the court overturn? You just said you want to see the court protect the Second Amendment. Do you want to see the court overturn Roe v. Wade?
Well, if we put another 2 or perhaps 3 justices on, that's really what's going to be, will happen. And that'll happen automatically, in my opinion, because I am putting pro-life justices on the court. I will say this, it will go back to the states, and the states will then make a determination.
But the reason is all too clear. Donald Trump's deliberate move to install pro-life conservative justices meant the writing for abortion was always on the wall.
Wow.
Reactions?
You tracked it right. you tracked it right, brother. It's right there. It's right there. Now is the flip flop because you see? I'm assuming you see a flip flop, right? They started.
Yeah, he started out pro-choice, and he
Right.
said pro-choice about 15 different times. So he started pro-choice, and he also said that he wouldn't even ban partial birth abortion. So he was very clear. Then he slid over to pro-life, and then he went from pro-life to appointing 3 pro-life justices, Supreme Court justices. That's 3 different levels of, acting on what you believe. But the interesting thing about that clip, his answer during the debate on abortion was probably one of the most clearest things he's ever said. He was very clear, and he clearly understood this is what will happen if this happens. He knew This is overturning. It goes back to the states. I know it. I know it already. So it's clear that this wasn't some bumbling, stumbling guy, but he knew what he was doing, and he understood what he
Absolutely.
was doing, and it was intentional. He was very
Oh,
intentional
sure.
about what he intended to do, and I think the flip flop was more. I'm not sure he really cares about anything other than
Right,
himself.
right.
And the flip flop was more political expediency.
Sure,
Yeah.
sure. And I wonder if you have that very same thing now. You know, one of the things that's happening in Congress right now is
Hmm.
that political expediency. I mean, well, listen, the whole idea of being for Trump. You know, after he, led the charge to kill folks in there, and still, they're still out there pro-Trump. You can see the power of politics. The
Hmm.
power of the political will of the people
Hmm.
being enforced upon the mindset of the leaders. If this is what the people want, if this is what Donald Trump wants, even if my heart isn't there, I don't think that when you look at politicians, you can really know what they want, what they're thinking, and how
Hmm.
much is really what's in their soul versus what's in their political expediency. And unfortunately, because this is politics, it forces people, if we're going to move this needle, then people have to get involved in the political side, or we're going to see that this is going to take over.
Yeah, I think what if Donald Trump doesn't understand anything else, he understands people, and he
Sure.
understood that when he took those positions, that was going to endear him to a specific set of people, and that those people are so passionate about what they believe, you never lose their support no matter what you do.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, as long as I'm pro-life, so I can do all this other,
Right.
performing on the side, but I'm still, I'm pro-life, right? I'm pro-life, so I still got your vote, right? And there are people who are one-issue voters. That's the only issue they
Yes.
look at and say, "You got my vote. I don't care what you're going to run the country to the ground. No, you're not going down abortions that happen. I'm good." So I mean, that's sort of the country that we live in, and the politics that operate, within that realm.
You know what? And I can accept that. I can accept
Hmm.
that. From from a secular position. The political world, the world in and of itself. It's only when the church becomes, one issue. From works in a
Hmm.
one issue perspective. Listen,
Hmm.
this it's when the church has two or three hot button issues that will trump everything. Now, maybe when you look at politics, and pro life will trump the value of women, will trump the
Hmm.
idea of a woman's ability to choose. I get that in politics, but I wonder when that seeps into the church, then the danger now that happens in our everyday lives that's greater than what may happen at a CNN moment. That which is preached upon the pulpits, and
Hmm.
in our Sunday schools and in our Bible studies, that
Hmm.
might actually have a greater impact on our view of what love is. So we'll begin to talk about those things from the position of a Donald Trump. And even though Jesus never spoke the things that Trump says, but he talks about love that Trump never talks about. So we choose the ministry of Trump over the ministry of Christ. And I think there is where the church can get moved into politics, where the church never moves the church. It just, the church doesn't have that same power. The government and federal government begins to move the church, but the church doesn't move the government. And that's why we need that separation, because I don't think
Yeah.
the government was ever going to move. And the government is only affected when people are affected by the word that comes out of the
Hmm.
church. And when that word is the same word you're getting in Washington, we're doing that. When pastors are no longer preaching the Bible, but they're
Right.
preaching the Constitution, we're in
Hmm.
trouble.
Yeah. Well, so let me ask you this:
Sure.
should the church take a position at all?
The church has no position other than love. The
Okay.
people, the individual, the church, if we look at it from an organizational standpoint,
Hmm.
no,
Yes.
it has only one obligation, that is to love. It,
Hmm.
it, it loves in spite of your choices. Right? I mean,
Right.
the church is supposed, we don't have to like a Klansman, but the church doesn't shut its door to a Klansman. We don't have to like a
Right.
supremacist group, but we don't close our doors to supremacist groups. So no, the church's position has to be the only position Christ has ever taken, which is love your
Hmm.
neighbor and your enemy, those you agree with and that you don't agree with. But now individuals can take a stand.
Hmm.
Hopefully that stand is influenced by what they're being taught, so that even in their stances, even when if it's pro-life or it's pro-choice, it's still done with love. And I think when the church gets moved into politics, when it preaches the same passion of a political leader and not the passion of Christ, then we get bombings. We get, we've got our own versions of the Proud Boys. We get our own versions, I mean, so, we're of Antifas. And so we become like Christian Taliban, where, we say we love Christ, but, cover your face up. So we're walking. It's a really dangerous issue. No different than the other issues that are there. Gay marriage. Listen, the Bible's clear, so we don't have to go with the Bible. How do we handle them? What are we supposed to do? What do you do with anybody? Love them as yourself. And God will unravel the mess. We stand where we stand, but we don't stand on issues. We stand on the word.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the ideal.
Yes.
But I think that the church has been, I don't want to say dragged. The church has allowed itself to be co-opted into a political entity.
Yes.
Where does the church stand on this? That's why I asked about the church stand, because when people go to a specific pastor, a particular church leader, whether it's a priest or whatever, they ask them, what is the church's position on XYZ issue?
Right.
As if that's the issue. I mean, that's the stand for everybody who's in the building.
Right.
But never, to your point, never, really infusing that with, but we're here to take care of people. Ultimately, you're 100% right. Ultimately, the church is supposed to be taking care of people, not sort of sifting through their lives and say, you just lost your membership.
Right.
You're pregnant at 17, you're not married, you're out. You're gay, you're out. You're this, you're out. So I think that we've sort of done this sifting out, purifying of the church that Jesus never asked us to do.
Right.
So that's what you end up with. You end up with a bunch of people who think exactly the same, who believe the same in terms of politics, in terms of culture things. And that, I think that is a very dangerous place for the church to be in. But the church is there. The church is absolutely there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And so, it's so dangerous at a spot. Well, Christ has to do that. He has to sift it, in order for us to really see the real church. And I think that what you see is an opportunity for the real church to emerge. It is these kind of issues that will bring about the emergence of the true church, because only those that are really, really about the one thing that Christ came to do, which is to show love, to seek and save those that were lost, to go after that mother who feels like she just can't, she can't have that baby. There is hope that's there on either side. If she has the baby, there's hope. But you know what? If she doesn't, there's hope. And that's what we minister. We minister hope. We don't minister the solution, because the solution is Christ. We don't minister ourselves as a solution. We don't say the abortion clinic is the solution. If a woman has an abortion, there's so many other things that are going to happen. There's so many memories. There's so many issues that will be there. We need to make sure that we don't alienate people because of decisions that they made. We need to still be there. If she has the baby, we're going to be there and help with the baby. But if not, we need to be there because we also know the ramifications that this is not a perfect choice. And we have compassion for that imperfect choice, not, looking and saying, I can't wait for the ball to drop. I can't wait for, you to feel what you did.
Yes. That's wrong. Yeah. Let's take a quick look at another clip.
Okay.
Let me turn to abortion. The ban on partial birth abortions or late-term abortions, you supported that ban.
I did, and I do.
You believe that Roe v. Wade was not correctly decided, and that you also believe that a right of abortion was not secured by the Constitution. Why did you change your mind?
Roe v. Wade is as close to we're going to be able to get as a society that incorporates the general lines of debate within Christendom, Judaism, and other faiths, where it basically says there is a sliding scale relating to viability of a fetus. We can argue about whether or not it's precisely set, whether it's right or wrong in terms of its 3 months as opposed to 2 months, but it does encompass, I've come to conclude, the only means by which, in this heterogeneous society of ours, we can reach some general accommodation on what is a religiously charged and a publicly charged debate.
Do you believe that life begins at conception?
I am prepared to accept my church's view. I think it's a tough one. I have to accept that on faith. That is a tough decision for me. But there is a point relatively soon where viability, it's clear to me when there's viability, meaning the ability to survive outside the womb, that I don't have any doubt.
It's a sad day for the court and for the country. Now, with Roe gone, let's be very clear. The health and life of women in this nation are now at risk.
So the interesting thing for me in those two clips was in the first one, he really seemed to be struggling. Like he was really wrestling with the issue of
Sure.
life began and when. And then the second one is like almost like he was pushed to this absolute position. Like, no, this is wrong. And it's like two different people. It seemed like to me.
Or did you see maybe an evolution in his thinking?
It could have been that too. It could have been something of an evolution. But I think in the second one is like there's an absolute thing there. There's no wrestling. Like even whatever side you fall on, there should still be wrestling. There should still be. I don't know when life begins. I don't know what the answer to these questions. So you should still have some humility and say, I don't know. I'm wrestling with this. This is not easy. And not saying it as if I know the answer. The answer is this, and this is what it is. I think there was some of that in the second clip, and none of that in the first clip.
Interesting. You know what I mean? I guess I didn't necessarily see. You saw wrestling, and you saying in the first clip.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I definitely saw some wrestling in the first clip. Now I think that I didn't see the wrestling in the second clip because I think that what he was saying is that overturning Roe versus Wade is going to absolutely destroy certain freedoms in women that you don't have to wrestle about. I think that the destruction, take away choice, you don't really have any wrestling. Now you can, he said we can fight over the viability, and we can wrestle with, when life begins. But as long as you have that umbrella, I think he was fine. Once you take the umbrella out, there's really no wrestling over whether you're gonna get wet. Once you remove the umbrella, the only thing we can really talk about is how wet we're gonna get. But the truth of the matter is, if it's raining outside, we're going to get wet. And so an umbrella is definitely not as good as a gazebo, but it's better than nothing. I think now he's saying we have the gazebo's gone, the umbrella's gone, we have nothing, there's nothing to wrestle about. Everybody in the country is going to suffer. I think that's what I kind of saw there. I think that's kind of the desperation here, that there's no wrestling here. There's nothing to wrestle about when we now have to recover what we lost.
Okay.
What do you think about that?
I mean, I know where you're going. I understand your point. I don't totally disagree. I just didn't see that at first.
You don't like the absolutism, right? You don't like the you don't like the idea that it's like I know that I know that I know.
It's not even that I don't like it. Is that it's a different tone. It's a different approach to the same issue. And to me, if the absolutism is how you end up with the abortion clinics bomb. I mean, I think that I know what's right, and this is what's right, and this is the thing. I think that sort of sends you down a slippery slope. I think.
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right.
Potentially.
Well, listen. I think it's definitely a slippery slope as it pertains to the average American. I think with people who are placed in position, they've got to make a decision and have got to say, I believe this is right. Right? And we let the Supreme Court and we let lawyers and we let everybody continue. The appeals process has never stopped. Obviously, the fight against Roe never stopped.
Right.
But I think that there's got to be a place where we do get set on some settled law. There's got to be something that's actually settled. And as humans, we never fully know. But there's got to be some things that we look at and say, okay, this is settled law. Civil rights is settled. We won't look at it anymore. Equal pay for equal work should be settled. We won't look at it anymore. That all men are created equal. Now we have to get to the point and say, are women equal? And do they have the right to do with their bodies what they want to do, even if we don't like it? And at some point, we've got to get settled on that. Maybe not settled on all the nuances, but we've got to get settled on whether women are truly equal. And part of this is really what this is about, that women aren't really yet equal because, you know, a baby that's in there that she's carrying, she isn't really fully responsible for her own choices yet. That's a tough call.
It is, but I'm gonna leave it there. I think that's a good wrap up to this conversation. I like how you kind of brought it all together. So I'm gonna leave it there. And you're actually out of time. So man, this was a great conversation. Really enjoyed
Absolutely.
it. Just thank you for all your insights and just your willingness to come on and just have a discussion. Thanks for the callers and everyone who watched, who's going to watch this. We thank you for tuning in. We hope you'll tune in again next week. No idea what we're going to be talking about, but we'll talk about something that's relevant, and hopefully you'll tune in and call in and make your voice heard. And so we look forward to that.
Awesome.
All right.
Thank you to everybody. Good job, Elder.
Thank you.
All right.
Good night, everyone.
God bless you, everybody.